The Fear Boy. The Fear Boy. The first time Thomas saw fear, it wasn't a feeling. It was a shimmer, a pale green light leaking from his mother's hands as she fumbled the car keys, late for work. He was 7, sitting on the bottom step, tying his shoes for school. He blinked, expecting it to be a trick of the morning sun through the stained glass transom, but it lingered. A faint, sickeningly sweet mist. He thought, maybe, that everyone saw it, and he just hadn't asked. "Mom," he'd ventured later that week, "why is your tummy glowing purple?" His mother had laughed, a forced, tired sound, and pulled him into a hug. "Oh, Tommy, what silly things you imagine. That's just the light from the TV." But it wasn't. The light, the color, the intensity. It was always tied to something specific. Fear was a sickly green ooh, like pond scum on a forgotten bathtub. It hovered around the shoulders and hands, a trembling halo. Anger was a frantic, pulsing scarlet, rising from the chest like smoke from a fresh fire. Joy was an airy, bright gold, like scattered confetti, swirling lightly above the head. Thomas, or Tommy as everyone called him, didn't just see the colors, he felt their echo. The green fear made his own stomach turn with a sympathetic, dizzying lurch. The scarlet anger gave him a brief, hot headache, and the gold joy. That was the best. It felt like drinking cold water on a hot day. As he grew older, he learned to read the room not by the expressions on people's faces, but by the canvas of light around them. He could tell the difference between the low-level, ambient blue-gray anxiety, a nervous hum in the supermarket aisle, and the sharp, sudden spike of green terror, a little girl spotting a wasp. This secret sense, however, was a heavy burden. It separated him. How could he join his friends in a ghost story around a campfire when he could see the dull, pulsing green nervousness coiling around the storyteller's neck, proving the fear was a performance, not a genuine threat? How could he trust a teacher who spoke confidently about an upcoming test while a thin sheet of purple despair coated their desk? By the time he was 17, Tommy was an expert at avoidance. He avoided crowded places because the riot of colors was deafening, a screaming visual noise that left him exhausted. He avoided intimacy because the deep-seated emotional colors were too personal, too revealing. His peers, sensing his distance, simply labeled him the quiet boy, or sometimes the fear boy, because he seemed to flinch at things no one else saw. The library of unspoken things. Tommy found solace in the vast, quiet expanse of the old city library, not for the books, but for the people who read them. The librarians, in their predictable routine, often exhibited a calming, dull beige, the color of routine and mild contentment. The students huddled over textbooks showed a manageable, focused yellow, concentration. It was a neutral landscape where he could finally breathe. One afternoon, he was shelving returns, a part-time job he'd taken for the solitude, when he noticed Mrs. Albright. Mrs. Albright was 72, with a silver bun and a smile as soft as worn velvet. She was a regular, always asking for the newest historical fiction. Today, however, she was seated at a small wooden table, and she was glowing, not with a pleasant color, but with a color Tommy had never seen. It was a cold, pure white. It wasn't the absence of color, it was the presence of nothing else. It wrapped her from head to toe, static and silent, radiating an impossible stillness. And within that white, like a splinter of ice, was a tiny, sharp spike of the brightest, most concentrated green fear he had ever witnessed. It was so small, so precise, it seemed to be centered directly in her wedding ring finger. Tommy froze. Pure white. He knew all the major colors. What was this? He'd seen grief. A slow, darkening blue-black. that clung like wet mud. He'd seen joy and anger and anxiety, but this white was different. It felt like a void. He watched her for 5 minutes. Mrs. Albright didn't move. She simply stared. He had to know. The color was too unsettling to ignore. He walked over, gripping the edge of the rolling cart. "Mrs. Albright? Is everything all right?" She startled, her eyes blinking rapidly, breaking the spell. The tiny green spike flared and died instantly, leaving only the white. "Oh, Tommy, dear," she said, her voice thin. "You startled me." "Yes, I'm fine. Just lost in the story." She closed the book gently, but her hand trembled. "You look," he hesitated, searching for a non-visual explanation. "You look worried." Mrs. Albright's eyes, soft and watery, looked directly at him. A small, sad smile touched her lips. "You have a gift, Tommy. You always have." Tommy felt his own pulse quicken. The usual ambient beige of the library staff around him was suddenly obscured by his own rising green fear. He'd been caught. She didn't wait for him to confess. "The white," she said, leaning closer, her voice a low murmur. "I suspect that's acceptance. A kind of peace." Tommy's breath hitched. "Acceptance of what?" She gently ran her finger along the spine of the book. "Of the inevitable. They gave me a few months, dear. I stopped the treatments last week. It was too much noise." He finally understood the white. It was the calm before the ultimate storm, the quiet surrender after the last fight. It was beautiful, terrifying, and profoundly private. "And the green?" he whispered, pointing vaguely toward her left hand. A tear finally escaped her eye and tracked a slow path through the fine wrinkles on her cheek. She held up her left hand, revealing the thin gold band. "My husband gave me this ring. He passed a long time ago. I misplaced it this morning. I looked everywhere. I was so afraid I'd lost the last physical piece of him." Her voice broke. "I was terrified that I wouldn't have it when it was time." She paused, then smiled again, wider this time. "I found it, of course. It was on the bathroom counter, right next to the soap dish. It was a silly, terrible little fright. Just a moment of panic. The little spike of green, the terror of final loss, had vanished the moment she put the ring back on. Now all that remained was the serene, terrifying, pure white acceptance. The gift of seeing. Tommy stood there, leaning on the cold metal cart, completely exposed. This wasn't a performance. This was truth, stripped bare by a woman with nothing left to hide. He saw not a frightened old lady, but a woman making peace with her ending. He realized then that his ability wasn't a curse of noise and confusion. It was a translator. It was the only honest language left in a world full of polite, colorful lies. "Mrs. Albright," he said, his voice husky, I'm going to go find you a new book. Something really good. A romance. A happy one." She nodded, the white light around her somehow warming slightly at the edges. "I'd like that, Tommy. Thank you." He turned and pushed his cart down an aisle, a new energy crackling beneath his skin. He stopped at the fiction section, and for the first time in years he looked at the other patrons, not with dread, but with curiosity. He saw a young mother with a toddler. Her light was a shifting, hectic orange-brown, the exhaustion of 2 jobs and too little sleep. A teenage boy in the corner, headphones on, was a vibrant, soaring violet, the color of new, exhilarating crush. And then he looked down at his own hands. He expected to see a low-level, murky green, his default state. Instead, his hands, his shoulders, and his chest were surrounded by a shimmering, gentle color he'd never seen on himself before. It was a translucent rose pink. It felt warm and solid, like a heartbeat. He didn't know the name for the color, but he knew the feeling. Connection. For the first time, he wasn't separated by the light. He was participating in it. He had seen someone's deepest fear and their ultimate peace, and he had reached out anyway. Tommy, the fear boy, found the thickest, happiest romance novel he could, its cover proclaiming ever after, and walked back to the reading table, ready to share a story with the woman who had taught him how to see the end, and by extension, how to start living.